be here with you today. I'm going to approach this from a little bit different angle. But before I do, your question about the value of coins, the reason a coin has a higher value than bullion is the work that is required to turn the bullion into the coin. The numismatic value is where the spread is that you're concerned about. With regard to your second question about the value of gold changing and us being exposed to that, most people, anyone who understands the system, would rather be exposed to the changing dollar value of gold than they had to have their accounts exposed to the changing value of the Federal Reserve notes. So, my name is Shane Coley. I've studied history and economics extensively. I was raised in the cattle business. I can operate or rebuild heavy equipment, and I'm a professional software architect. I'm self-employed. I was recently a candidate for state senate in District 47, where I carried my home county. My positions here today match my positions during the campaign. The laws of Georgia are created and modified by our state legislature. The legislature is made up of individuals like you who analyze legislation in the context of your personal belief system, which makes your belief system very important to Georgians. The majority of the Banking and Finance Committee members publicly claim to be Christian. Therefore, I'll talk about some of the general constraints or limits of the Christian belief system, and then about secular belief regarding theft or stealing. In at least 9 places, the Bible tells us about differing weights and differing measures. In at least 4 places, the Bible says that differing weights and differing measures are an abomination to God. A Christian must not ignore this. Here's an example of differing measures. Suppose I were in the marketplace buying grain and I had a basket marked 1 bushel, but secretly it was a little bit larger than a bushel. You would have to put too much grain before I pay you for what you think is a bushel. So my oversized basket would enable me to steal part of your wheat. Differing weights and differing measures deceptively cause theft, which is a violation of the 8th commandment, you shall not steal. Since 1971, the only way to create a new U.S. dollar is to record an entry in a ledger of the Federal Reserve System or to create an entry in the ledger of your local bank. Producers have to work for years to acquire new dollars that a bank creates instantly with the stroke of a key. When new U.S. dollars are created in this way, there's no new wealth created, but the purchasing power of all previously existing dollars is decreased. This is an example of using differing measures to steal labor and property from producers. This is clearly, undeniably, objectively a form of theft. To support fiat or fractional money is to support theft. Some claim that our money system makes us wealthy. This is false. Wealth is the result of production. Many of us notice that people depend on production. People eat food and use things. Food and things must be produced. Government produces nothing and wastes much. Since people depend on production and government interferes with production, there's no way that government has any solutions for us. We must remember that every promise made by a government official has to be kept by a producer. There is no other way. It's impossible to confiscate a loss. Only profits or capital from past production can be confiscated. It's logically impossible for the creation of new U.S. dollars to make us wealthy. If I had time, I would prove that creating costless money will first make us poorer and eventually crush our free society. The reality is that the creation of costless money can only lead to the destruction of a free society. For those who are not constrained by the Christian belief system, if you oppose theft, then you must oppose creating new U.S. dollars from nothing. Please listen carefully to the following quote from an old banker. The few who understand the system will either be so interested in its profits or so dependent on its favors that there will be no opposition from that class. The great body of people mentally incapable of comprehending the tremendous advantages will bear its burden without complaint. To the Christians and those who oppose stealing, I respectfully ask that you vote for the Constitutional Tender Act as a small step toward eliminating differing weights, differing measures, and theft from our monetary system. And finally, let's recall a bit of what John Maynard Keynes said in 1919. While creating costless money impoverishes many, it actually enriches some. And also, inflation engages all the hidden forces of economic law on the side of destruction, and does it in a manner which not one man in a million is able to diagnose. To those members who hold stock in banks or have otherwise profited from the banking business, since our loss is your gain, I respectfully ask that you recuse yourself from this vote and from the vote on the final bill.
Representative Williamson. I assume I did fully disclose that I am a bank owner, so you.
Yes, I was very clear. Yes.
Okay, and I'd be happy to do that. Now, did I not hear you say just then that Georgia banks are creating money?
Yes.
Now, you want to run that by me one more time? How we create money?
Sure. Fractional reserve. If you and I started a bank together and we had $1 million in capital, today that capital can be U.S. dollars, which actually have no value. But if just in the past days, let's say that we had to have gold, if you and I had $1 million in gold in our bank, then we could immediately loan $9 million in deposits from our ledgers in our banking system. So there's a 9-to-1 leverage there. And that's new dollars that are created into the marketplace. The Federal Reserve System creates dollars based on the exchange with the federal government, deficit spending, that pushes the dollars into the marketplace. And then banks have that as capital that they then loan you money. So
wait a minute. Now, the only way that bank can create capital is through profits.
Right, but the profits come from interest that is born from dollars that are created from nothing. It's fractional money. If we have $1 million in capital,
it's not nothing. It's promises to pay that provides a liquidity to to shopkeepers, to homeowners. So I'm not disagreeing with the fact that it expands the money supply, but I don't see that that's inherently unhealthy. All you're doing there is allowing these promises to pay. That when you come to borrow the money to buy the automobile or the piece of land or buy a new shelving for your hardware store, all the bank's doing is turning around and lending you those dollars from basic. It's not the collateral, it's your promise to pay back. And given the fact that everybody's mentioned the fact that we are the Chernobyl of banking, we have had more bank failures than any other state. It's hard for me to understand as a bank owner how, if we're greedy and stealing and doing things dishonestly, we really are double stupid to lose so many banks and not make any more money.
I agree with that. Here's the thing. We agree that we have inflation in our society.
Inflation, it all goes back to fiat inflation. I do not disagree one bit with the fact that we should never have gotten off the gold standard. I think Steve Forbes has got it right. But all we are is dealing with the Federal Reserve notes that our federal treasury is.
Right, I understand. But if you look at the quantity of dollars that exist, though, the greatest quantity comes from the fractional lending practice. This is the reason we have the flood of credit cards. In order to keep our system going, we have to continue to loan more and more and more, because every dollar that exists is a debt, is a unit of debt, not an equity or a commodity of value. The other thing, to your point about people needing liquidity, as Bill Evelyn pointed out, in 1910, he didn't make this specific statement, but it's illustrated in the document he gave you. In 1910, 70% of all business expansion was self-funded. This was because people had capital. They didn't have to go to the bank in order to borrow money. And the other thing that happens with fractional money creation is that you socialize the losses. Whereas in a commodity-based system where I actually loan you capital that I have to go get my hands on, silver or gold or what have you, the losses are localized to our transaction, not to the broader community where you have banks failing like dominoes.
Okay.
I would love to have the discussion and to share with you the claims to substantiate, or the information to substantiate the claims. But when you create new dollars, that's how the dollar quantities grow, which is inflation. Inflation is not rising prices. Inflation is an increased quantity of costless money. And when you create money...
But if those dollars were backed by gold, it would not be costless money.
If they're one-to-one backed, I agree with that. If it's a one-to-one relationship, not 2-to-1 or fractional. And it destroys. The thing is that we can see in history that this always leads to destruction. Even when you just debase a coin, even having a lower and lower percentage of gold in a coin. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Coley. We have another meeting scheduled to start about 5 minutes ago here. And if you would draw it to a close, please.
I will. I have here a little essay called The House That Uncle Sam Built, and then Great Myths of the Great Depression, written by Larry Reed, Foundation of Economic Education, and then a book called Whatever Happened to Penny Candy, which looks sophomoric, but it's actually a very excellent work, and then a copy of The Law by Frederick Bastiat, 1850. These are all very useful documents to sort of back up some of what I'm saying here. I'll be happy to leave these for any who would be interested. I have a few other copies. And if anyone would have an interest in refuting the claims, the positions that I hold, I would love to have the discussion, the debate in any form at any time. But I can tell you for certain that if we debase our currency, we'll destroy our society. Thank you. Yeah, I'll leave this here.
We have several other speakers.